Hey, welcome to the Autopsy of Unwise Choices, a journey we're going to take into the crossroads of life and the consequences that follows. I'm your host, P.D. Ware, bringing you nearly 2 decades of experience from the deaf industry. Each episode, we will dissect the real-life stories and peel back the layers of decisions that have been leading our youth to unfortunate ends. Our mission, to illuminate the path of wiser choices for our youth. So let's embark on this journey together, because every choice tells a story. Are you ready to listen? Hey, welcome to the Autopsy of Unwise Choices. I'm your host, P.D. Ware, and I am joined today by Miss Ebone Dukes. And Ebony is the Funeral Service Program Director for Northwest Mississippi Community College. And I am going to allow her to share a little bit more about herself and her background and how she got into funeral service in the first place. Ebony?
Thank you for having me, Pam. Again, I'm Ebone Dukes. I am currently the program director at Northwest Mississippi Community College for the Funeral Service Technology Program. I am also a graduate of the Funeral Service Program at Northwest. I graduated in 2012. During my time at mortuary school, I worked for a family owned funeral home, Harrison's Funeral Home in Memphis, Tennessee. And prior to that, I did not really have much knowledge of funeral service at all. I thought people's families just owned funeral homes. I didn't know that you went to mortuary school or, anything like that. And initially, I wanted to be an obstetrician, actually. So I went from like one end of life to the other. But when my grandmother died in 2006, she looked nothing like herself. And I wanted to know what happened. So I ended up going down this rabbit hole. And that's when I discovered mortuary science and funeral service. And I was actually in college at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, studying for my finals. And I remember calling my parents and telling my dad that I think I want to work at a funeral home. And he was like, a funeral home? Where did that come from? And my dad actually went to Harrison's on my behalf and talked to Miss Adriana Harrison. It was like, my daughter's in Knoxville, but she's really interested in this. And Miss Harrison said, when she comes home, tell her to come and talk to me. And that was kind of the beginning of my journey. And so I went on and worked at a corporate funeral home in the city for several years. And then I started working at Northwest as an instructor. And now I'm again the program director, and I still do some trade work, contract work for several funeral homes in Tennessee and Mississippi.
Okay. So, Ebony, you are a first generation mortician as myself. And that is awesome. I am a UT alum, uh,
I don't think
class of
I
2001.
did.
Yeah. So I've got undergrad in anthropology is what I got my undergraduate degree in.
So you work at
Uh,
a dairy farm.
yeah. Yeah. We had and sometimes they kind of frown upon the name the Body Farm Tennessee Research Facility, but absolutely, definitely where a lot of educational opportunities take place. So, one of the things that I want to accomplish with the podcast and the reason that it's called the Autopsy of Unwise Choices, and the goal is to transform the decision making of youth. And one of the things that I noticed in the last couple of years is how much the landscape had changed since when I first had a desire at 14 to get into mortuary science up until now. And I've shared on several occasions how back then you didn't see a lot of young people death notices in the paper due to the amount of violence that we're seeing now, what seems to be a norm on a day-to-day basis. And so, if you would, with your, and I know you've been embalming for a long time, just kind of share what the landscape was like when you first got into it, with the type of case that you have, compared to now in the cases that you've had to prepare in preparation for final viewings for family as it relates to youth, and how that has affected you professionally, personally, and kind of what you've seen as far as the trauma that is done to the families.
Okay. Well, when I first started in funeral service, it may have been the funeral home where I worked, because you know, being in a large city like Memphis, you do realize that, just like with everything else, a specific funeral home has a specific clientele. Um,
Mhm.
but even with that, like when I first started in funeral service, it was very rare to see, a young person be murdered, for example. Um, e- the very first child that I embalmed was a little boy. He actually was killed. It was a ATV. His grandfather bought him one of those four wheelers for Christmas, and so it was somewhat of a traumatic death, but it wasn't a homicide. Um, and I probably had been working in funeral service for 2 or 3 years before I saw my first homicide. Whereas now, um, goodness, it happens so much that you kind of just shake your head and you say this is so sad, but it really has become a norm. Um, and I think what people don't realize is even though it's so common, you watch the news and you see it every day, it's not. It doesn't make it any easier for the families. For a family to come and do the first viewing of their loved one, maybe even before the prep work has been done, because their loved one may have, left to go to a party or um, to go to the grocery store, and they ended up at the funeral home, laying on a viewing table. Um, and so for the families, it doesn't get easier. It doesn't become a norm. It is a devastating, life changing event that, regardless of how many people they lose in their family, it never gets easier for them.
And Ebony, would you say that families are aware of how much preparation goes into the trauma cases, as far as like getting them ready for that final viewing? Like what you have to, like all the steps that are necessary in order to be able to create a pleasant experience in, like you said, one of the most devastating environments that they're going to be in my opinion, when you're dealing with death, whether it's expected, but even more so the way that it seems like life is just being, you know, carelessly just thrown away due to the decisions that our youth are making.
I don't think so. For one, I don't think they care. Just being perfectly honest. And when I say I don't think they care, I don't think in their mind it doesn't matter how much work goes into it. They just want their loved one to look whole again. So that's what I mean by that. But no, I don't think, if you're not back there doing the work, you don't take into consideration that someone has to stand at the head of that table and literally, like a jigsaw puzzle, put someone's skull back together. Um, so um, multiple bullet wounds closed. Try to um, reconstruct jawbones that have been, distorted. I don't think that's something the normal mind, you know, thinks about or could fathom until you're there doing it. Um, I think if people saw kind of behind the scenes of what we do, I think it would maybe make death more real. It would make it something that people may actually think more about before they, you know, pull the trigger multiple times on a person. Because what we see, and I think you agree, I know you agree, it's unnatural for people's lives to end the way that we see that they do. No, it doesn't matter what you do. You shouldn't die with 53 gunshot wounds. That's just it's something that shouldn't happen.
I agree. And I think one of the most heartbreaking things as well is how, like, just watching the scenes and stuff play out when we get to, some of the funeral services that we do. And I tell people, one of the things I say is there is rest in death. There is no peace in a manner in which our kids are leaving here. And we see, everybody is making sure that their hair looks good, nails are done. We got matching t-shirts. But I beg that we have the conversations that's necessary instead of, sitting down and talking about what nail salon we're going to or who we're going to get to do the t-shirts. What do we need to be doing behind the scenes, in our homes? What message do we need to be putting into our kids in order for them to make better choices that are going to create these better chances? Like in your time as a funeral director and sitting down with the families, like what are some of the stories in the background that you've heard? And it doesn't have to, we won't talk about specific case, but just some of the decisions that the kids have made that have unfortunately, you know you've had to prepare them, for, the final viewing. Like, what are some of those stories that you hear from families of what got them to that particular point?
It seems in one way or another, it's always uh, uh, we told him not to go. We told him not to do this, or he was hesitant about going, but went anyway. We say all the time, something told me. I had a feeling, and you have to get to a point to where you listen to that and you believe that, because the media will make you think everyone who gets killed is a bad person. And I don't believe that. Yes, people do bad things. But again, nobody deserves to die that way. And when you listen to people tell the stories about their loved ones, a lot of the times, e- especially like the young men, they're looking to belong, they're looking to feel connected to something. And unfortunately, it's like those negative situations that kind of draw them in, that make them feel like they're a part. And, but when you're sitting around the table, you get to hear the parts of them that the
Mhm.
media won't tell you about, or the parts of them that maybe they didn't portray all along. And that's who the family loved. That's who the family mourns. Um, but I think a lot of the stories have that general or that same theme of, we told him not to do it and he did it anyway, or we told him not to go and he went anyway. Because I think young people, especially, they think those types of things happen to them. They won't happen to me, not realizing that them was me, at one point. And everybody is one decision away from a negative outcome. And just being mindful of the decisions that you make, those split second decisions can have long lasting effects.
Absolutely. And one of the things I share with the kids when I'm out speaking is how much association plays in a lot of the things that I've seen play out. And like I said, especially when you have a kid that is on the brink of, doing something good, that's going in the right direction, but it's like they're drawn to that person or that group, and just that sense of belonging and not realizing that what they feel like is a belonging is actually leading them down that road of no return. And I can't tell you how many cases I've had where it's just association. I'm talking about kids like right on the brink of graduating high school, their, mom, dad are depending on them, they're taking care, they're contributing at home, they're doing positive things in the community, in the school, and it's like the life just gets snatched away from them,
Mhm.
and like you said, some of them, they may not get a second chance to make a better choice. And
Right.
so I tell kids all the time, you have to be mindful. And I share stories, I don't go into specifics or cases, but just the scenarios that the news doesn't share. Something as simple as a ride with a friend that you may have known for a long time, but you know that they're involved in things that could bring negative consequences. But you jump in the car because you're going to the store, and all you worried about is getting some candy and a jungle juice and some chips and going back to the house. And 5 minutes later, 5 minutes is quick, but it's a lifetime when you're running for your life.
Right.
And we've had several incidents of those cases where, kids just a simple car ride somewhere and they find themselves on the table, and then you got distraught parents because grief just does something, I mean, the way it wreaks havoc on our community, and it is wreaking havoc on our community because, families and you can't get that life back, to have a mom or dad or grandmother, or brother or sister, and they can no longer communicate, with their loved one. And so that's heartbreaking. You know, you can say everything you want, but you can't bring them back. And one of the things that I've had to do in my time with the ME's office is having parents that come in and they'll say, "Will you please just tell my child that I love them?" and tell them that I'm sorry. And I would find time by myself, and I would go in the cooler and find their child and hold their hand, and whatever their parent asked me to whisper to them, I would. And just knowing that that's just the first stop, on the journey of anguish that they're going to have, and it's heartbreaking, how much we see on the news nowadays with kids, not really having a chance to really live out their potential
Mhm.
because of the decisions that they make. And Evan, I'd love to hear some of the advice that you would give our youth when it comes to decision making in order for them to, one, be around long enough so they can realize what their purpose is and that they can maximize their potential.
I think young people need to be okay with um, being different. You know, um, a- and it's okay to not want to be a part of negative situations. It's okay to be smart. You know, it's okay to be a nerd, to be the geek, or however you want to put it. You don't have to um, have this like negative stereotype about yourself. Um, it's okay to say, you know, I need help. A lot of, I think, and just listening, like, to families talk, a lot of the times it's like people are chasing after like love or acceptance, and they're running in the wrong direction. It's okay to tell your family, tell the people that care about you, hey, I need a little bit more attention, you know because we all want to be loved. We all want to know that someone loves us. Say, Mom, Dad, I need you to put the phone down. I need you to get off social media and pay me some attention.
Yeah,
Um, because I think just rebuilding the family unit, however that looks. I'm not here to say what a family unit should look like, but just rebuilding a strong family unit can save a lot of young people, because that's at the end of the day, I really believe that's all it is about. Like, we want to know that someone loves us. And for a lot of them, they're just finding what they think is love in the wrong place. And, it's leading them down a path of no return. So I think that would be my biggest thing. Know that it's okay to say you need love and attention. Um, and know that it's not just one decision. Um, because that one decision has like this spiraling effect that impacts you, your family, you know, your future. So it's not just one decision. And social media and reality TV and these video games and stuff, it makes life appear um, as this thing that you can do over multiple times. Like, I don't like how it turned out. I can just reset. I tell my students all the time, you know, the profession that you've chosen to go into, you have to be mindful that no, we're not perfect people, but we have to strive for perfection because we don't get do overs. We can't say, when your loved one, I messed your loved one up this time, but when they die next time, I'll do it over. You know, Death doesn't allow do overs. And that's something young people need to realize too. Video games, you can start those over. Songs, although I'm kind of indifferent to believing that music or really pushes people, but I think it does have a somewhat of an impact. But people rap about certain things or sing about certain things, and then you will find out that's not even their life. They're rapping somebody else's life or something like that. Like, you have
mhm,
to understand what's real and what's not, and be able to differentiate between the two.
absolutely. And I think that was a very powerful statement that you made when you said that death doesn't allow do-overs.
Mhm.
Uh, Very profound. And I think if more of our youth realize that, and my challenge to parents is to, for the ones who may have kids that have made those requests, you know, to listen to them. Like if they're crying out for help, answer them, allow them the ability and the freedom to speak and to be heard, but also to reciprocate whatever it is that they're saying that they need. Uh,
Right.
and I think that is, like you said, such a need for kids because a lot of times, and one of my siblings, my youngest sister, she's in education, and she coaches as well, and she has such a great relationship because she goes to all of the different sports events, and so she'll have kids, in her class that she supports, and so if another student gets out of line, she doesn't have to do anything. Like those students step up, and some of them she has to fuss at sometimes, but it's that tough love that they may not say nothing, but they crave it. Like
Mhm.
they really do, appreciate that because once they realize, I know it's hard to build trust, but once they realize that you care, and I think, we all can do a better job of, showing and like you said, making a little bit of more time in the social media age that we're in, and like you say, getting back to that family unit, whatever that looks like for each home, but making home a safe space.
Yeah.
But also, tuning into your kids enough as parents that you recognize what their talents are and, what they're good at and uplift them, in those areas and not, bash them for things that they're not good at. And I hate going into stores and hear parents degrading their kids, and talking down to them,
Mhm.
and you got some kids that need a little bit more rough push than others. But as a parent, I think it's our job to recognize what's going to be the proper catalyst that's going to push our kids towards success instead of pushing them away from them where they don't want to communicate with them, or they're more easily drawn to those negative groups of people that allow them to be in negative situations. Because, like you said, once, and I tell them, my phone don't ring, when people at the hospital. It's a grace has run out,
Mhm.
when we get phone calls. And that's the sad part about it, but it's also reality, and telling kids that when you look at video games and stuff like that, it ain't like nothing that you see on TV. And a lot of them think, oh, well, I'm gonna go fast. And sometimes, you know, you can tell they suffer, going through the process of, out on scenes and back in autopsy, like, and just one of the things I've always tried to grasp is when you know that a kid suffered, like what were those last seconds of moments like? Because they don't know when they get ready to take that last breath that it ain't no more waking up. It's no turning back the hands of time then. Like what those moments are like, and it's got to be something in those moments that can inspire our kids today to do better in what they're getting themselves into, who they're allowing to lead them. And then I also love what you're saying about being okay with being different, because I tell kids it's okay to fit out. You
Mhm.
don't have to you don't have to fit in with everybody. Everybody has uniqueness about them, and it's important to embrace that because that can take you far. And I share, people thought I was weird when I was in school because I wanted to be a mortician, but you never know where that will take you. You never know like what doors that's going to open, for you, because not everybody can walk in the shoes, and do their work. And I think I can speak for all of us, that we are compassionate in what we do, and we don't take it lightly, the cases that come before us, even in the midst of our own heartbreak and dealing with what we have to see on a regular basis. And so, E, the last question for you, like, what are some ways that you've handled being able to continue to do what you do at a high level with what you see?
I um I get massages. When things are really rough, especially like when I was working at the funeral home full time,
Hmm.
I made it a point. I stayed at the gym as well. Like so I had a gym routine. But I would a couple times a month I would just go and get a massage. Um Allowed myself a day to just do nothing, and I still do that. Well, not in the last 7 months, but um, but I think decompressing is so important, and so however that looks for you, decompress. Um, have a hobby. I craft, so I like one of the things that I love most about what we do is I'm able to use my hands to turn something that's so um negative. Death can be have this negative connotation, this negative, view. And with my hands, I'm able to turn that into a pleasant, experience for families and friends. And so I like to craft too because I love taking um different things and creating something beautiful that people enjoy. So crafting is something else that I do to kind of take my mind off of the seriousness of my job. Um, I think those are the two biggest things. I'm big on self care. I brunch with my friends, um, and then crafting. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And one of the challenges I've been trying to give to those that are listening to the podcast, if there is a kid in your life that you know that has come across your path, that crosses your mind from time to time, reach out to that kid to offer a word of encouragement on a regular basis. And Ebony, I appreciate having you on the Autopsy of Unwise Choices podcast. We'll definitely have you back again. And we will see you all on the next episodes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining the Autopsy of Unwise Choices, where today's stories are more than just cautionary tales. They're beacons guiding our youth towards better decisions. And remember, the choices that they make today shape their tomorrows. So if today's episode moves you in any way, then share it with someone who needs to hear these lessons. Follow us at pdwhereinspires.com to check out the weekly blog, book speaking engagements, and check out dates for upcoming live events. And remember, until next time, encourage our youth to make choices that pave the way for brighter futures.